Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Bryan Adams album, So Happy It Hurts. 16th studio album from the Canadian rocker and just released on March 11th of 2022. And we'll dive into it in just a bit, but before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with a review for the brand new Bryan Adams album, So Happy It Hurts. So a little bit of history, a little bit of context here to set the mood, so to speak. He released his self-titled debut album in 1980 and followed it up in 1981 with You Want It, You Got It. But it'd actually be his third solo album, Cuts Like a Knife, in 1983, where he finally would break through. And then his fourth album, Reckless, in 1984 is the one that made him a household name and a star around the world, selling 5 million copies just in the US alone, with lots of other multi-platinum awards throughout different territories. And then in 1987, he followed up that success with his fifth studio album, Into the Fire. But it would be the Robert John Mutt Lange produced sixth studio album, Waking Up the Neighbors, in 1991, that would be another high water mark for him and just essentially immortalizing Bryan in the pantheon of rock at that point. This one here, the reason being, featuring his biggest hit, Everything I Do It For You. And this song was an enormous hit all around the world. It reached #1 in 19 different countries, just solidifying who he is and what he can do. And in 1996, the same team that made Waking Up the Neighbors would make a follow-up, 18 Till I Die. And despite the change in musical climate at the time and it not being the 80s, this one here still sold 1 million copies in the US and was fairly successful around the world. And so now over the years, Bryan has released 9 more studio albums. He did a movie soundtrack, playing all the music for it, 1 covers album. He did a musical, Pretty Woman, and it was actually just released March 4th digitally. His version of it, where he's singing all the tracks, no word if a physical copy will get released, and that's what makes this one here, the new one we want to talk about, the 16th studio album, because all through promotion it was actually referred to as his 15th studio album. But 1 week before its release, he releases another album. So you've also got that to check out, which is how great having actually 2 Bryan Adams albums to listen to. But we're going to talk about So Happy It Hurts today. So as I mentioned, 16th studio album. It's got 12 tracks on it, 39 minutes long, so it's a relatively short album. But what I like about it is it doesn't give time to the songs to where they can actually outstay their welcome. So this is a nice, succinct album. So even with those 12 tracks, it just barrels right through on it. It's done before you know it, which actually makes me want to play it again. And the album itself is described by Bryan as a return to life after the pandemic. He's saying that the pandemic took away spontaneity with the lockdown. All touring stopped. You couldn't just jump in your car and go wherever you wanted to. And so this album here is about freedom, spontaneity, and the thrill of the open road. And of course, you'll get that in a number of the titles that are on this. The album itself is much of what you would expect from a Bryan Adams album, especially after all these years. But after his last album, Shine a Light, that one had much more pop influence in it, and then some of his other ones kind of focusing on the overall modern pop sound. And this one here, I feel, brings a bit more of the rock vibe back to things, so I'm very happy about that. Some of the co-writes that are on this are interesting. We got Robert John Mutt Lange co-writing 5 tracks on here, which anytime he is involved in an album makes it even better in my opinion. And we've got Bryan's longtime co-writing partner, Jim Valance, doing 3 tracks that are on here. So again, if you're a fan of those ones out of the 80s and early 90s, you've got some of that here, and I think that's partly why this album has got a nice sort of return to rock vibe on it. And, you know, Bryan's vocals are still recognizable. He sings in the same style that he always has, and therefore making this album a welcomed, fun album that it is. So let's talk about some of the standout songs that are on this album, what it is that makes this album so good. So track number 1, the title track, So Happy It Hurts, was also the first single off the album, and for me, just a really great opening track, perfect for driving down the highway. The lyrics even reference that. It's a lot of great energy on this one and a really big happy chorus to pull it all home. Track number 3, You Lift Me Up. It's one of his signature ballads. There's a couple of those on this album. It's got a very positive, uplifting message in the way that only Bryan can sing. Then track number 6, Open Road. It was the second single released off of this album, and it's a rocker with a great driving beat, pun intended. And, you know, it's just part of the idea that he was talking about returning to life after the pandemic and that open road and joining it and so forth. Track number 7, Kick Ass. This one here caught me off guard with its narrated storyline intro to it, and maybe a little tie over from the musical Pretty Woman in the sense that those are usually trying to tell stories in the way that they're done and their theatrics and so forth. So when you hear this song, I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. But once the song kicks in, which is about a minute and a half in, it is a rocker. And this one here, you know, really does rock up the album and what the title says, kicking ass. And so track number 8, I Ain't Worth Shit Without You, is a nice rocker on here, despite maybe the title. It's got a cool groove in it and similar in song style and type for something that I think could have easily appeared on his 1996 album 18 Till I Die. So let's take a look at this album. Interesting cover on here, standing on a beat up old car, holding that guitar up. Very classic Bryan Adams in that regard. But I'm always surprised when artists do this and don't anywhere on the cover write their name, Bryan Adams, you know, whoever the artist is. Of course, we do get it on the spine there. And there's the backside with all the track listing and so forth. It's a bit of an oversized, you know, cardboard packaging for this thing. So it doesn't quite fit with all the jewel cases, which always bums me out. I would have much preferred the jewel case edition of this. Great inside gatefold, though, on it. There's that beat up old car, though, with the So Happy It Hurts written on it and Bryan. And so we get the disc in the backside of it. Or sorry, that's the booklet, and I'll show you that in or actually, no, this is the disc, my bad. So that's kind of cool. This one comes in its own slipcase like that, another picture of Bryan and the track listing. And so you could take that one out, I suppose, and put it with your jewel cases. And then you do get the booklet in the other part. And he did a lot of great shots for this, which is nice. You get the lyrics and, of course, who wrote and plays on each of the tracks. That's where I found out, you know, the co-writes and stuff like that. Glad that they always do it. More lyrics, another couple shots of Bryan. There you go on the back side. So there you go. That's the packaging for it. It is nice packaging. I always do appreciate when there are, you know, photos of the artist and, of course, lyrics and who performs on the songs and whatnot, despite if it's in cardboard packaging over a jewel case. But bottom line, on this album here, new album from Bryan Adams, in my opinion, is always cause for celebration. And, you know, much in the same way that other 80s rockers, you know, don't quite sound the same as they did in the 80s. They rock a little bit different today. You know, Bryan Adams, this album here, it's no different. He has moved on. But the album itself, while it still has its pop sensibilities and it does mix in some modern flair, and he's been doing that his whole career too, especially since the 90s, this album here is still completely Bryan Adams. I think it's worthy of his legacy and worthy of being part of your collection. So I do recommend checking it out. All right, everyone, hopefully you enjoyed this, the review for Bryan Adams' latest album, 16th studio album, So Happy It Hurts. Certainly, if you've enjoyed this video, consider sharing it out on social media. I would greatly appreciate it, and I think Bryan would appreciate the promotion as well. All right, everyone, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.